Hey everyone, welcome to Build Your SaaS. This is the behind-the-scenes story of building a web app in 2018. I'm John Buda, a software engineer.
And I'm Justin Jackson. I'm a product and marketing guy. Follow along as we build Transistor.fm. Actually, I want to say I'm now a junior Rails developer.
I think so, yeah. Put that on your resume.
I'm going to put that on my resume. So how you doing today, John?
I'm good. I'm a little tired.
It feels like I took you out of a, I want to say programming slumber, but you weren't in a slumber. You were in a programming trance.
Yeah, I was jacked in.
And what are you working on right now? What were you so?
I always do this. I have multiple branches of code open at once, and I'm just kind of moving around to each one when I get stuck or.
Oh, I see.
I was actually working on this HubSpot integration because it's actually fairly simple.
Oh, cool.
to add HubSpot, as a newsletter option, mailing list option for Transistor customers.
Oh, cool. So that'll be in our integrations section, which is actually, one of the things that we need to do is I've had so many people ask me this lately. I was at a Halloween party last night, and I've just been running into folks that are like, so what's the deal with Transistor? Like, give me the pitch. And I say, well, we are podcast hosting and analytics. We're a podcasting platform for businesses and brands that want to start a podcast. And, as we figure out what really differentiates us, we get some of that feedback from our customers. For example, we've had quite a few people switch from a host that shall not be named, one of the old timer players. And to be honest, they've done great things for podcasting, but their user experience is just not great. And their embedded player is not great. And so a lot of folks are moving to us just to get a better user experience. Folks really like that embeddable player that you built. It looks good in a lot of situations. And so some folks just switch because of that. They want to look more professional. They want, they want a nicer user experience when they're using the tool every week.
Could be, the idea that maybe it's being updated more often and it's newer. Mm-hmm. Maybe the other one got lazy and they're just sort of like making money. Yeah,
making money, or they just got too stuck in the old, they're too far gone. They can't, their code base isn't versatile enough or flexible enough or they just need to do a rewrite, which is always really scary. So, so that HubSpot integration, a lot of businesses use that. It's pricey, that HubSpot.
Is it? Yeah, I wasn't too familiar with it. They do a lot. It seems like it does a lot of stuff just other than contact lists.
Yeah. They're one of those enterprisey CRM tools.
Yep.
They are, let me see here. So it's professional is $800 a month. They have a big jump here. So free is $0 a month. I don't know what you get with that. And then starter is $50 a month. But then it goes from $50 a month to $800 a month.
That's a big jump.
And then enterprise is $2,400 a month.
Poof. And people are confused about our pricing.
Yeah. People.
Man.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Anyway, so cool. Well, that sounds good.
Yeah. I think we're still, like you said, we're still sort of figuring out what the differentiation is. We have a lot of potential customers asking us why they would switch or what's the difference or what makes us better.
Yeah. And maybe just for us to be honest right now, we are struggling with our pricing tiers. Or more actually not the pricing I think is right. I feel like it's what we offer in each tier because
right. Yeah.
To be honest, like I feel like the downloads per month really fits that $19 plan. Everyone's getting started. It's really hard to get a podcast up to, even 5,000 downloads a month. But what is stopping people from signing up is everybody wants to have a big show. And so in their minds, they're like, well, this could get expensive, or maybe it's too limiting in our mid, and upper tier.
Right.
And so we haven't done this yet, but I think we're going to start to do some feature gating, meaning some of our more enterprisey features are going to get added to the higher tiered plans.
Yeah, I mean, as we build more into it, yeah, right now there's not a huge amount of differentiation, so it makes it a little tough.
Yeah.
To sort of, tell people or ask people to upgrade.
Yeah, exactly. So we're still playing around with that. We've had some great feedback from folks about, maybe we need to go downloads per episode per month. That really, you get more and more like, what is that average? So we're going to track average download, because average downloads per episode is actually an interesting metric because the challenge, as some folks have illustrated, is that as shows become older and their back catalog is still downloaded, it's like exponential growth. If you've got a show with 100 or 200 episodes, you can almost guarantee you're going to get thousands of downloads just from your back catalog. Even if they're just being downloaded, each episode is only being downloaded 20 or 30 times a month, that back catalog starts to really add up.
Yeah.
And so the idea is we would give folks some sort of metric for, well, if your episodes are getting this many downloads, this is what you pay. And then it's a little bit more, maybe fair, because then you're not being penalized for having lots and lots of episodes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we're going to continue to look at. It inside of Slack. That's the one thing that I bring up almost every week. Like, I really want to fix this. It's not quite right, but figuring out what is right is the tricky part. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, we'll continue to hash that out. I think we have a lot of feedback, to go through and sort of weigh out the pros and cons of each of those.
Yeah, and it might be, maybe it'll just be a slight shift, or I don't know. Anyway, let's take a break and let's say thank you to our Patreon supporters. We've got a brand new one. Brad, my buddy from Canada, just joined the Patreon ranks. I've known Brad for quite a while. Yeah, he's good, really good dude. Good musician, good guitar player. Just one of those good old souls. I think he's the same age as me, but
he's an old soul.
He's an old soul. Like when I'm feeling gritty or haggard, or like I just need to hang out with another old man on the porch. He's the kind of person I would want to hang out with. Just feels like we'd be drinking sweet tea and playing
on your rocking chairs.
Yeah, maybe playing a little banjo or something. And
sounds good.
Yeah. So thank you to Brad for becoming a Patreon. Who else do we have, John?
We got Darby Frey, a buddy of mine in Chicago. Thanks, Darby. And
then we got Kevin Markham and Adam Duvander. And should I try it? Dave Junta.
Close. It's like GIF versus GIF.
Oh, yeah. See, I'm always trying. I think the pronunciation that I'm mistaking is in the IU, but it's actually like the IUNTA, but it's actually, right. I'm getting the wrong consonant.
Yeah. Dave actually sent me a message on Slack after our last episode, which was a fun one. Our trip down memory lane.
Oh, yeah. We got tons of feedback from that episode.
Yeah.
Lots of folks liked it. And it made me think that if we do another show for fun, that would be a great show to do. Like we mentioned last time, just a deep dive into some bit of computer nostalgia.
It would, yeah.
And, this show's not going to last forever. One thing we need to talk about at some point is I think there's this idea that when you start a podcast, it has to be forever.
Right.
And one of the things we wanted to build into Transistor is this flexibility to start new shows.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you need to do, a couple seasons of a show and then you stop.
Yeah, maybe we hit 50 episodes and then we do one episode every 6 months as an update.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's I mean, I think as long as you have something to say and as long as people want to hear it, you should keep going. But maybe people aren't testing, podcasters don't test the waters enough, which, just asking two questions. One, do I still have something to say? Do I still enjoy the show? Or am I just phoning it in every week?
Right.
And two, are people still listening? Are people still eager to engage with you in the bounds that you've created, the box that you've created for the show? And here's an example, and this is don't get me in trouble for this, but I think Merlin Mann and Dan Benjamin have great chemistry together, but their show is still called Back to Work, so meaning it's a show ostensibly about productivity. And I've kind of always thought that, maybe just like bookend that show, great run, and even if you start a new show in the same feed, which I know a lot of people wouldn't want to do, but start a new show in the same feed or, create a whole new feed, but just, it's okay to bookend a show and still even have the same hosts, but say, this was about productivity, but now we're going to talk about BBSs every week.
Yeah. Guitars or something. Right. Yeah.
So for this week, we thought we would talk a little bit about startup expenses. Is that kind of the theme?
Yeah, I think so. The startup expenses, how to rein those in, when to spend money, what we've noticed over the past,
what are we at now?
10 months.
10 months, yeah.
Well, yeah. I guess since the beginning of the year. Yeah.
And maybe to start, do you want to give folks kind of an idea on, because some of these numbers are hazy for me. How much did it cost us to incorporate through Stripe Atlas and all that?
Stripe Atlas was $500.
Okay.
There was a little bit of extra with that due to some renewal fees for the business license. I think that was a couple $100. We had some extra lawyer fees, I think, once we sort of got our paperwork together.
Yeah, that wasn't too much. I'm guessing, I'm just looking for it here.
Yeah, it was only a few hundred, I think, because we got a sort of a deal through Stripe Atlas, I think. Yeah,
$366. Yeah, there was those expenses. Anything else that was kind of substantial at the time, do you think?
Well, there was, we had we hired our designer, Dylan.
Oh, yeah.
So we gave him, I want to say $2,500 for everything, for branding. And
yeah, that was a big expense.
Yeah.
And that might be an interesting one to come back to, because I think one of the things I want to do today is contrast, the way we've done things with the way other folks often do them. And often bootstrappers don't spend that much on design. And it might be interesting to, why? Because you were the one that made that decision. Why did you feel like, and we were joking offline, like you are quite frugal when it comes to business expenses.
Yeah, I try to keep them low. Recurring costs. I don't know. Design was one of the things that I really felt was, hugely important to like set the brand early on and make it look as professional as possible. Mm-hmm. And like I have some design experience, but not on the level of branding and like really, I don't know, explaining an idea to another designer and having them just sort of like go with it. Because I had ideas in my mind of what the mark and the branding could be, but it ended up being completely different than what I would have thought. But that was what I explained to Dylan, was like, here are my ideas of this thing.
Yeah.
Kind of riffing on the transistor idea of like this, like analog transistor, but digitally and stuff. And so he just like went with it and came up with something completely different. And it was great.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have to worry about that. We just met every couple weeks and did some revisions and then settled on it.
Yeah. Again, I think one of the traditionally, when bootstrappers start a business, you're starting something that you don't know if it's going to work or not. And so the inclination is, I'll just jump on one of those logo sites, or I'll try to, make something myself. And I can understand that tension of maybe I'll just save some money, and then once I know I'm onto something, I can invest in branding.
Right.
But there is something to say. It's a little bit of a risk, right? Because you could have invested that money, and then it could have just been like a bust. Like,
Right.
like you never get a return on that investment.
Exactly. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was an appropriate thing to spend money on at the time. I was sort of, like I didn't technically need to start. I didn't need to incorporate Transistor from the get go. Really could have started as something else, but I just felt like, man, I kind of want to, get rolling with this thing and really to start it legitimately, put a little bit of money into it, my own money, and just like run with it, not have to worry about the business stuff, not have to worry about the design stuff, and really just be able to focus on building the thing.
Yeah.
Building the app itself.
Yeah.
Which I think worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a similar experience with like Mega Maker was the first thing I ever really invested in design up front. For me, it was like, I think I really like this brand name, and regardless of what happens to it, I'm willing to invest the money because I think it's going to be something that I'll kind of treasure regardless, like even if this doesn't work out, just having this branding is fun for me and worth investing the money.
Right.
And the advantage is when you have a great style guide and a great, logo, and, your colors all figured out from the beginning, it's one way to set yourself apart from the sea of fly by night. We built this in a weekend, put it up on Product Hunt, kind of.
I agree. It's like, hiring the designer. If it was me, I would have probably just opened up Photoshop or Illustrator, gotten a few font ideas, typed in the word Transistor, and like made up some weird logo. And then 6 months to a year down the line, probably be like, well, we should probably spend some money on rebranding this thing.
Yeah.
But now everyone's already used to it. So I felt like it was worth it.
Yeah, totally. I just think it's interesting for us because so many people don't spend money on that.
Yeah.
Comparatively, this is all such small potatoes too. Like
it really is.
We're talking about under $5,000. The one thing that we did have to spend some money on is that before we had started our partnership, you had already registered the company. And so our corporate filing fees are, like just to file I'm assuming this is what it is because I'm going through this right now for my personal business, just to file your corporate taxes, even if you have no like major expenses and stuff, just to get an accountant to do that.
Yeah.
Can be $2,000, $2,500, somewhere around that range. And so we had to pay for that because we had already had a fiscal year, right?
Right.
What the product didn't really get going until around January.
Yeah. That probably could, we probably could have waited, had it, whatever, hindsight being 2020, could have waited to use Stripe Atlas until the first of the year, but when I started, I didn't know we were going to be partnering up. So
yeah, exactly.
It's all good. Yeah.
So those are our startup expenses. What I wanted to explore a little bit is just the monthly expenses that go into running a startup. And I'm going to go back to an old tweet I was just telling you about. Last year at this time, I was looking at my own business and just feeling like I'd started hearing about this Profit First book, which kind of talks about ways of running your business to maximize profit. And I'd just been to this retreat in Colorado with a bunch of smart people. James Clear is the one that organized it. James Clear, Sean Blanc, and Sean McCabe had organized this event. And one of the things we talked about was profit and how expenses lower profit, which sounds, common sense.
Yeah.
But one thing, there's this guy there named Tan Pham. He is Tan HT Pham on Twitter. And he has this business he's been running forever. And he said, let's say your profit margins are 5%. So for every $100,000, you make $5,000 profit. That's after you've paid salaries, everything. And he said, well, this event we're going to, this retreat, is costing us at least $1,000. So that reduces your profit to $4,000. So to maintain your 5% profit margin, like usually the way I would think about that is, oh, I'm going to this retreat. Okay, I'm going to need to make an extra $1,000 to cover,
right.
XOXO or whatever. He says, no. To maintain a 5% profit margin, you'll need to make another $20,000 within 3 months for the retreat to be a good return on your investment. Do you understand the math there? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'd never thought about it that way before. And so I was kind of like on this train of feeling like, okay, I need to reduce my expenses. And I posted all of my software expenses. So monthly like subscriptions, WP Engine, $100 a month, email newsletter, $90 a month, Recurly, $31 a month, Memberful, $25 a month, Media Temple, $17 a month. And you'll see there's some overlap here that I can talk about in a bit. Audible, $15 a month, Google Apps, $40 a month, DigitalOcean, $37 a month, Dropbox, $14. So every business starts accruing these monthly expenses. And I posted this thinking, okay, I want to reduce these expenses. But then folks who replied, many of whom are great business people, said, this is a waste of your time. If you're trying to reduce your expenses, like, maybe I could reduce my WordPress hosting bill from $100 down to $40, but is saving $60 a month worth my time? Right.
Or how long is that going to take? Are you better off using that time to get more revenue?
Yes. It's been interesting for me to kind of revisit this, especially since I've started working with you, because you, like I said, I'm used to just like, I need a service and I just take out the card and pay for it.
Right.
And I think and I'm sure there's people out there listening. If you identify with this, say hell yeah into your podcast player. But small business owners can get in this habit of just spending money, because the idea is like you got to spend money to make money. And there's also this kind of common wisdom that, yeah, why are you sweating over $60 a month when you're billing at $100 or $200 an hour? Like, right. You dummy, like just go make more money, just send more emails, make more sales, etc.
I get in this like engineer mindset where I'm like, obviously there's a lot of services, third-party services, integrations that we can use that are features that people would love, but then we're paying a large fee for this other service whereas like maybe there's a way we can engineer our way to a cheaper solution or like build our own. Mm-hmm. And that's the fun part of engineering, but I guess you gotta like pick your battles and be like, well, do I want to spend time building this, or do I want to pay, $20, $50, $100 a month for this other service that will save me, I don't know how many days of work.
Yes. And there is some wisdom to that. I think that is the conventional wisdom that we've got around to, which is, in the old days, you'd be in a software company and, the engineering, the sales and marketing team would say, well, we need X. And then the engineering team would say, well, we can build that. And then, they would build, you'd spend thousands of dollars of engineering time building this thing that you could have just bought off the shelf for, $25 a month.
Right. I mean, my day job, sometimes we're like, well, we don't want to engineer that. Let's, or like, let's pay some money for a thing that's already built and does a great job.
Yes.
It's not our main focus. Like, I don't want to build a tax calculating platform because that already exists.
Yes.
Somewhere.
But I think one thing that working with you made me realize is you can get on these ideological trains. So you hear these sound bites, which is, like double your prices, charge more. And on the flip side, don't worry about expenses. Like, it's always cheaper for you to buy something off the shelf than build it yourself. And you can get on those trains and then start to not question what you're doing. Meaning, in my personal business in MegaMaker, I've just accrued all of these monthly expenses and I just rationalize it as, well, this is just the cost of business, right? And I think one thing I've been that came up for me this past year was I think we've talked about this before. I had some depression and some mental health stuff in 2017. This advice of don't sweat, saving money on hosting, that makes a lot of sense when you're not burning money. But when I couldn't go to work and I was, I'd get into the office and I'd get one thing done a day, that really, that burn rate really affected my life. $100 a month might not seem like much, but when you have 5 or 10 services like that are all $100 a month.
Yep.
And
it adds up.
It adds up. And so, $1,200 a year, and then you've got 5 of those, that's $6,000. And, at the end of that last year, I was kind of like, man, I could use $6,000 right now.
I haven't really thought about my reasoning behind, trying to keep things.
You were going to say cheap out.
cheap things, keep things cheap, or, reduce costs. But I think the more I think about it, the more I feel like getting rid of a service you depend on that you've integrated with is actually harder than getting rid of crappy code you wrote and adding in a new service once you reach a point that it makes sense.
Yeah.
So if we started from the get-go and depended on all these $100, $200 services, then we're stuck with those unless we want to engineer our way out of it.
Yeah.
Rather than once we reach some level of, traffic or whatever that we need to actually purchase, a more robust system, then that would make sense.
Yeah, totally. Well, and again, I think one of the advantages of working with a partner is I was in this habit of just spending money. And it wasn't until I had someone, in this case you, check me and go, no, let's not spend money on that. I didn't realize how much of a habit I was of just spending money. And, I know we've gotten some flack for example, your choice to go with Zoho.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Have we?
That got mentioned on stage at MicroConf.
Nice.
They didn't say us in particular, but I know it was about us. They said I was listening to a podcast about 2 guys that were starting a business, and they went with Zoho instead of Google Apps. And he's from the stage. He said, "Listen, that's not worth your time. Just go with Google Apps." On one hand, I can say, well, actually, what do you think about that? I should get your reaction.
I don't know. It's kind of hilarious. I get it. Google Apps is great. It's way easier to set up, but again, it's not even much money. It would be I don't know how much a month it would be for us. $10, $15, $20 a month. But
yeah. Well, I mean, now it's increased. So it used to be $5 per month per user. Now it's $10 per month per user.
Okay.
But again, if you go back to my tweet that I'm going to include in our show notes, this is episode 32. So sas.transistor.fm/32. You can get these show notes. But if you look at my Google Apps expenses, and I got in when it's $5 per user, I'm at $40. Well, why is that, Justin? Well, because I added other users for different things. And so now I'm paying times 4, right? These things can expand easily.
Right.
And so, we start spending $20 per month on Google Apps, and anything we spend extra right now, right now we're kind of saving up. We're saving for this time when you and I can go, start taking money out.
Right. So yeah, everything we spend money on now is less we can either pay for our lives or put back into the business, because the other, I guess once we talk about monthly expenses for Transistor, one of the things that will happen for us is that we will run out of, we got AWS credit through Stripe Atlas, which is essentially paying for our hosting of the app itself outside of, media bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to run out, and that will be a couple $100 a month.
Yeah.
So like we got to, keep that in mind. I mean, at the point it runs out, the hope is we'll be in a better place and, we'll have more paying customers that will cover it and it shouldn't be a big deal. And obviously we have to pay for hosting. We're not going to like necessarily cheap out on that.
Mm-hmm. And the bigger thing I'm realizing is just once you get into a culture or a habit of spending money, when spending money is encouraged, there is some danger to that where you just take the soundbite, which is, oh, come on, our biggest expense by far is salaries. Like anything else we spend money on is just small and comparable. Which is true, but the flip side is also true that once you start kind of encouraging expenses and you say, well, expenses aren't a big deal, we can always just cover it with revenue, you could eventually get yourself to the point where you're just spending a lot of money. Part of me is feeling like back in 2017, I should have just reduced my expenses because, I would have been further ahead now than I am. And now I'm looking at this new business that you and I started and I'm like, man, our burn rate is so low. We're not paying ourselves yet, but just outside of our salaries, like this business really doesn't cost us that much. And there's something about that I think is healthy. And maybe we're eventually going to need, maybe once we get to scale, it really doesn't make much sense to sweat over these small little expenses.
Right. Probably not. But I think it reduces a certain amount of stress now that we just don't necessarily have to worry about. Yeah.
And again, I think you need to be careful about who you're following advice from. So, there are people who've been bootstrapping for years or people who are in the funded startup ecosystem. And the idea of saving $10 a month or $20 a month on Google Apps is ridiculous to them. But this is your journey, business owner.
And also, we're only using it for email, right? Like we wouldn't necessarily be using Google Apps for like all of the things in there.
Mm-hmm.
All I wanted was email that's with our own domain.
Yep.
That doesn't cost a ton of money or anything right now. And I set up my email through, a desktop app or on my phone. I don't even use the Zoho web app and I don't notice a difference.
Yeah.
It's email.
Yeah, it's email. Exactly. And maybe this kind of questioning is good anyway, because sure, we're sweating some small details now. Some things are worth spending money on, right? For example, podcast hosting. Mm-hmm. That's a good expense.
Good branding.
Good branding is worth spending money on. And we'll get into this in a bit, but we said this before, we spend quite a bit of money on podcast editing.
Yeah.
And eventually we're going to, more and more of our expenses will be hosting, like, Amazon, the cost to Amazon Web Services and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's okay to look at your expenses and go, well, maybe I should optimize some of this every once in a while.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get in, like I said, it's keeping the expenses low reduces the stress of having to worry about that. And I wouldn't, if it got to the point where all we were doing was sitting there trying to squeeze out every penny, then we wouldn't actually be building the thing.
Yeah.
So, it's not like it's taking up all of our time.
I think it's also just way easier to be thoughtful about this stuff now. For example, there's messaging like chat widget company. I don't think I need to name names, but people know who I'm talking about. That has increased prices 3 times in the last year. And so folks are now, startups that were spending, whatever, are now spending $500 a month for that suite of products. I think it's good to spend money for services, right? Like if we need to spend money on our chat widget, I'm fine to do that. But I think there's also, this idea of always like charge more and like that businesses should always be charging more. And then, on the expense side, we should always just be like, wow, it's always easier to buy than to build. There is patina to all of this.
Yeah. The example of the chat widget you're talking about, I think it's like they realize that their market are these other companies that are making a ton of money or have a lot of venture capital, which just makes sense from their perspective, but it really does price out people like us, which is unfortunate. I mean, I get it for them, like that's great, but they were once in the spot we are, or their other customers were, right? They were just starting out. They had to keep their prices low, and then they become this well-known name, and everyone wants to use them, but it's just like completely unapproachable. And maybe these companies have, money to throw away or whatever, but just because you have, $20 million in the bank doesn't mean that, $500 service every month, if you have however many you have of those, is going to, it's just
yeah. All of this stuff can scale. Like anyway, so I'm sure we're going to get lots of feedback on this. I'm fine with that. I hope so. I know we are naive, people just starting out, but I have been thinking about that especially because the advice of you can always make another $200 to cover that thing that you just paid for. Sure, you can, but sometimes that just means you're working harder just to pay for this thing.
Right.
And maybe, really all you really need is web hosting, email newsletter, podcast hosting, a chat widget thing. Like maybe you can limit what your business is spending money on, and just have a better life and not have to stress out all the time about, okay, well now we gotta, we're paying for HubSpot Enterprise now, which is whatever, right? Like,
yeah, sure. If we had a bunch of money, I would love to have a $2,000 hosting bill with like the biggest, awesome, best servers, but that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, and then eventually when you get big, it makes even more sense for you to negotiate, right? Like the big guys, Walmart, they negotiate their credit card processing fees like crazy. Do you think they're spending the same amount on credit card processing as
absolutely not.
A Main Street business?
No, because 0.1% for them makes a big deal.
Exactly. And so that 0.1%, the equivalent for us is saving $10, $20 a month on our email or whatever.
Email.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Zoho's great. Use them.
So what are our monthly expenses right now? How can we break it out?
Let's see. So we have our, we have some yearly expenses, things like domain name renewal, which is $100 a year.
Yeah.
Not terribly a lot. So that's $8 a month or something.
Yep.
We have AWS is nothing right now, but will be probably, I would guess, by the time we run out of credit, $200 to $300 a month.
Okay. Let's just put $300 a month just for...
We have some other hosting we use to host our actual media, like audio files outside of Amazon, which right now is about 50, I'd say 40 to, let's say 60.
Okay.
That'll keep going up as we grow.
Yeah.
Until the point where it makes sense to actually probably use a large, like I said, a larger like CDN service that we can actually negotiate prices with.
Yeah.
And then we pay Chris to edit the show, which is roughly 4 times a month, sometimes 3.
Yeah. I'd say it fluctuates between, let's see, so probably $240 to $320 a month.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting one, because I think some folks will go, well, you folks just talked about how, you got to rein in your expenses and stuff. Honestly, like the money we spend with Chris is worth every penny.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, once we're done recording this, sometimes it's late on a weeknight. Neither of us want to edit that.
No.
Nor do I know how. I mean, I'd love to learn how, and I can sit down with some people at the office, but like, I'm not going to necessarily do it.
Yeah. I think the one thing about podcast editing is it just, especially for us, because we have limited time. And so that's actually something that saves time. All we have to do is do our phone conversation, drop our files in Dropbox, and Chris just takes it from there.
Yeah, and he does a great job. It's like kind of like hiring Dilton to do design, where Chris will add in these other like flourishes and sound effects and things that we wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah. Or we would just have to have more mind space to think about it.
Yeah, and I don't have that right now.
I'm writing our show notes right now, which does take some time, but it honestly, like, just to have the finished product just magically show up in our Transistor account every week is so nice.
What else do we have? I mean, yearly we have like our business, incorporation fees, which are, I want to say $200 a year, maybe.
Yep. Yearly accounting for a corporation is about $2,000, I think.
Yeah.
And that's just, man, it sucks because it doesn't matter if you're doing, this year will probably be our financial year. I don't know what our total income will be, but it doesn't matter if you're making $10,000 a year or $20 million a year. I'm sure your accounting fees go up a little bit, but it's a lot more at the start. Right?
Yeah, I don't know enough accountants. Do I have a friend who's an accountant? I don't know if I do.
That's the thing. We could trade some accounting for podcasting, but
sure.
It's one of those things where you kind of got to bite the bullet on that.
Yeah. As far as a monthly, I'm trying to think what else we pay for. Can you think of anything else?
There's some bank service charges that we pay a little bit of money for, but not very much. We have Flywheel for our marketing site.
Right. That was $100 for the year.
Yep. We have some WordPress plugins, like Yoast is $89 a year. And again, I was just about to say, not a big deal, like $89 a year, not a big deal. But those are the things that add up.
Right. And you forget about it. And then at the end of the year, you're like, oh crap. Didn't save money for that.
Exactly. Like there's always, I think the main point is that all of these things can add up. It can seem immaterial at the time. And I know we're going to get email about how, like, as soon as we hire our first person, it's going to be like, well, there it goes, $15,000 a month or whatever, right? Like the scale of these things is important. But if you look at our revenue to expense ratio, for sure, like so far this year, we've already got almost $10,000 in expenses, which you might say, well, that doesn't sound like, too much, but our total income is like $11,000 or something.
Right. Yeah.
So comparatively, our expenses are high as a percentage of, the business.
And some of that, though, was paid by money that we each kind of contributed.
That's right.
So
that's right. Exactly. Like, that's a good point. There's nothing really. Hosting, software, advertising and promotion, we've paid a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we did stickers and some T-shirts or something, but
yeah, it's so easy to look at these things. And I think it's the scale that is hard for people to understand, because if you are working for Cards Against Humanity or you're working for a 10-person startup, as soon as you add 10 people, you're probably paying at least 10 to 15 grand per person just for salary and, computers and
not to mention health insurance in the US.
Oh yeah.
Huge expense here.
So, man, the scale is what's different, because our little piddly expenses might seem so piddly compared to that. But when you look at it as a percentage of our total income, I think there's something there.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think I knew or had a good guess that hosting and hosting and bandwidth would be our biggest expense, and I think that'll probably continue. Well, until we hire someone. But
yeah, and that'll be another conversation. Like at one point, we're definitely not even close to hiring somebody right now.
No.
So yeah, I think I'd be interesting in folks' thoughts. If you want to reach out on Twitter at Transistor FM, or reach out to us any other of the other ways.
Yeah, you know, what types of services are you saving money on, or what do you think is important enough to spend money on that saves you time and effort?
Yeah, and what rationale do you use? And maybe even just if you are a small business owner, like if you are a solopreneur, or you've got a little 2-person partnership or a little 5-person agency, maybe just asking yourself that question: have I gotten used to spending money? Do we have a culture of just, it's no big deal, just, put it on the credit card?
Mm-hmm.
There's almost like some ego in there as well. Like, oh, of course we can afford that. It'd be interesting to have people's thoughts around that too. Like, have you actually looked at these expenses and thought about the repercussions of having that attitude?
Yeah. What do those add up to a year? And does it amount to enough to almost like hire another person versus, maybe some of those expenses are legitimate and they're like things for the team that really encourages people to, work hard or have a little fun, stick around longer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some of those things can certainly add up. I mean, I've, seen that stuff at the day job for sure. And I'm not even, obviously in charge of the books or anything, but.
And the thing is, you can model these things. Maybe I'll include this. I did this spreadsheet where I just go through different ideas, like, okay, what if I increased revenue by 10%? How does that compare to decreasing expenses by 10%? So using my 2017 numbers, if I increased revenue by 10%, my net profit would go up to 20 grand. If I decrease expenses by 10%, my net profit would just be 8 grand. So yeah, increasing revenue by 10% has a big effect for sure. But the problem with all this modeling is, sure, but what if your revenue decreases by 50%? Or what if you were able to decrease, like the relative nature of this depends on what number you start with. If I decreased my expenses by 50%, and so people are saying, well, it's always easier to make 10% more. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually easier for me to decrease my expenses by 50%. And in that case, I would have made, $32,000 profit. I guess I'm just revisiting this. And maybe there's some accountants listening to this, and maybe you folks want to look at the numbers or whatever. But
yeah, well, this will be a good, when we do our recap in a year, one of our occasional episodes, right?
Yeah.
Recap how things are going. We'll look back at this and see what our expenses are.
We'll just call the episode 3-hour budget session 2019. And it's just us going through our books.
There's a lot of calculator sound effects.
Yeah.
Keyboards.
Exactly.
It's us doing, it's basically an episode of us.
Okay. I'm ready to leave this, but I just want to reiterate again, because I feel passionate about this. I'm talking to the listener right now who's building something on their own. Your journey is your journey, and you can get feedback and ideas and wisdom from the gurus out there. But at the end of the day, you have to live with your decisions. And yes, there is some wisdom that comes from experience, but remember, some of these gurus, when they started their company, that was 20 years ago. And I will bet you any money that back then they were pinching pennies more than they are now. And so you really need to think about your startup journey or your building journey or whatever as your journey. And, take the advice from other people, but put it in your own context, because whether it comes to increasing revenue or decreasing expenses or getting funding or not getting funding, at the end of the day, you just have to figure out what is going to work for you. And that's part of the deal. Like if you're just always just photocopying what worked for someone else 15 years ago, I think you're going to be unhappy.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we'll close off that discussion. Any app updates this week?
Not a lot. I honestly, every week I keep saying, we're going to get Spotify analytic integration and we're going to get free SSL out the door. And then I don't quite finish it. That's just sort of where we're at.
We're moving the ball forward.
There's progress. Like I said, I have a couple different branches in Git opened up in various points of completion. Maybe that sort of signals an issue with how I work, but
John, we can't be too self-conscious here.
Right. So not a whole lot, continued couple of YouTube tweaks. Like I said, finishing up this HubSpot integration for anyone who uses that. The Rails coding that you had started and some of it finished is out the door.
Yeah. So if you go to if you're a customer and you go to overview, and then on the right sidebar, you can click RSS feed. That will now pop up to a modal. And I've already noticed this has impacted our customer support burden, because at least we have a place. A lot of folks, and this is completely understandable, but I'd forgotten about this. They don't understand this idea of a feed.
Right.
They don't get that. And so, and we certainly need to get better at this, but that we have to explain to folks, oh, wait a second. Okay. So a podcast is built on top of this thing called RSS. RSS is like every time you create a new episode, it's like a record of your episode. And we submit that to all of the directories like Apple Podcasts and everything else.
Right.
And they read this feed that's alive. Every time you publish something new, it gets updated. We have to explain these concepts to folks. And if they were just to look at the feed and just see a bunch of XML, it's not extremely self-explanatory.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me, obviously, because I'm a developer, but also a lot of these people, like with Chrome, it will open up the RSS feed and actually show you the XML.
Yeah.
But with Firefox and with Safari, it doesn't actually show you anything meaningful. It tries to open an external app.
Yeah.
And so people are like, I just clicked on this link and it went nowhere.
Yeah.
Or it's a bunch of gibberish and like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with this.
Exactly.
Which, makes complete sense. So
yeah, exactly. So, that's fun to get that out the door.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're continuing to work away. Thanks to all the customers that keep giving us great feedback. I think one thing we could say is we've just crossed another milestone. We are above $3,000 in MRR.
Oh, nice.
Both in, if we look at our Stripe billing metrics, well, actually Stripe we're just under 3,000, and our ProfitWell metrics, have us just above 3,000.
Nice.
So
that's big. That's a good number.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to, I don't know how that tracks with what we were, in our original estimation of like, oh, it's going to take us 5 years to get to scale. But that feels like it's just like, wow, like that's, we added almost $800 in new revenue this month.
Yeah, that's really good. So what's the next one? $5,000?
$5,000 is the next,
the next big one.
Well,
and then 10.
I'm going to celebrate every 1,000, I think.
Every 1,000. Yeah, that's good.
And once we're able to look at those pro plans, I really like the $19 plan. It just feels like for startups and smaller companies and smaller, personal brands, that's just a great tier. But I know we could be adding value to companies that, $99 a month is nothing for them. And, and we could give back way more. What are you laughing at?
We're saying it's nothing for them. We just had a discussion about how everything adds up.
Yeah. The irony. I know. It's just like anything, right? Like, I think value is proportional.
Well, what they say is the value of something is whatever people are worth paying for it, right?
Willing
to pay for it.
That's true, but I think we're getting back into it now, but the scale of that is what matters, right? Like if you're a solopreneur $19 a month, that's, you know, that you got to think about it. Like,
Yeah, if you're not sure if you're getting value out of it or if you're making your investment back, I guess. And we've had that question from several potential customers. How do I make money out of my investment?
Yeah.
Like, I never really thought about it like that, but
yeah, like how is this? And I mean, we have some folks that start a show on Transistor and they put their Patreon link in, and then patrons pay for more than their Transistor bill. And for them, that's a great way to just move forward.
yeah.
You know, there's other folks that are we have to compete every month and every year for someone looking at the list of things that they're spending on and going, okay, is this worth, you know, our investment? And if you're a solopreneur making $100,000 a year, you almost have to compete a little bit harder than if you are, you know, a company of 10 people that's making, you know, well over $1 million a year. Sure. Yeah. Then $99 a month doesn't seem like such a big deal. And then if you scale it from there, like there's a lot of companies out there making $10 million a year or 20 or 30 or 40. There is something about scale in this whole conversation. So
Definitely.
I think that's it, folks.
I think so. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next Tuesday.